Hi, everybody. Welcome back. We are diving now into medieval literature and Middle English. As you can see, I'm back in my classroom. And we are going to take a look at the Canterbury Tales, specifically the Wife of Bath's Tale. Now, you've already done, last week you did the background on the Canterbury Tales, and it's a collection of short stories where all these different characters who are traveling together from a pub, which is like a bar restaurant, along the road to a city called Canterbury, which is where pilgrims went because it was important, it was holy, they had relics there, people prayed, asked for miracles, all that kind of thing. And by doing a pilgrimage like this, where you were walking or riding a horse or going on a mule or in a cart or something like that, you were showing your devotion. And usually you would go on a pilgrimage because you wanted to ask God for something or you wanted to thank God for something. You know, it's like a prayer thing. But it's also a really long journey, and long journeys can be really boring. So the whole idea is this group of people are going to tell each other stories to keep themselves entertained. And we generally don't get these people's names. We just like get their job titles, or like in this case, the wife of Bath. Bath is a city in England, and she's referred to as the wife because she's a married woman. And the fact that she's a married woman is important to the story that she tells. So, let's dive in. Now, they start us off with a little bit of the prologue. Now, each of these stories has the interweaving narrative of all the people who are traveling, the pilgrims, talking to each other. So, you know, this guy says this and this lady says that, and they talk to each other, and they kind of explain why they're going to tell the story they're going to tell. Or sometimes they argue about whose story is better, and they interrupt each other and everything. And then, so those are the prologues. And then we get into the story itself. Okay? Now, we've got several layers of narration here. We have Geoffrey Chaucer is a character in this story. He's the author, but he's also done an author self-insert. And he's a character in his own story. And he's the narrator telling what everybody else is doing and saying. Okay? So we have the author, Geoffrey Chaucer. We have the character, Geoffrey Chaucer, who's our narrator. Then each of the characters he's talking about tell their own story. So then we're going to have the wife of Bath telling a story. So we're like several layers deep into narration here. Okay? All right, so I want you to go into Schoology. I'm stuck on my nail there. Open up the PDF of The Wife of Bath's Tale. And as I read, you're going to read along with me. It might also be helpful if you open up your notes questions and just keep them open in the background so that when we get to that section of the story, it's all tagged by line number, and I've got them in front of me here. If you have that open in the background, when we get to those, you can hit pause on the video, answer your questions, and then come back to the video. And that way, when you're done reading and listening to the video, you're also done with your notes questions. So we can do all of this at once. Okay? You ready? Here we go. Open up your PDF. Now, this is a scan of our textbook, so you can scroll past all the opening information. It's useful and it's there, but scroll past it to where you see from the wife of Bath's prologue and the lady on the horse. She's on a horse. Okay, ready? Okay. The pardoner stood up. Now, we'll hear the pardoner's tale later on. But he's literally a guy who sells pardons. He works for the church and he sells pardons, and we're going to get into what all that is later. The pardoner stood up, and thereupon, "Madam," he said, "by God and by St. John, that's noble preaching. No one could surpass. I was about to take a wife, alas. Am I to buy it on my flesh so dear? There'll be no marrying for me this year." So someone else just told a story about how awful it was to be married. And the partner's like, well, I was going to get married, but not anymore. Right? You wait, she said. My story's not begun. You'll taste another brew before I've done. You'll find it doesn't taste as good as ale, and when I've finished telling you my tale of tribulation in the married life, in which I've been an expert as a wife, that is to say, myself have been the whip. So please yourself whether you want a sip from that same cask of marriage I shall broach. Be cautious before making the approach. For I'll give instances, and more than 10, and those who won't be warned by other men shall suffer their correction. So Ptolemy has said in this connection. You read his Almagest, you'll find it there. Okay, so she's saying here, hey, listen, you better listen to my story before you make up your mind and then decide whether or not you want to be married. And she's got kind of an ongoing comparison here between taking advice and drinking wine. And so she's got an ongoing metaphor. And she refers to Ptolemy. Now, you've got a note on that on the side, who he was and the fact that, like, she's like, go read it in that book, and it's not in that book, it's in a different one. So she's sort of educated, but she, like, misquotes things. And we'll see that come up in her story later, too. Madam, I put it on you as a prayer, the partner said. Go on as you began. Tell us your tale. Spare not for any man. Instruct us younger men in your technique. Gladly, she said, if you will let me speak. But, still, I hope the company won't reprove me, though I should speak as fantasy may move me. And please don't be offended at my views. They're really only offered to amuse. So she says she's going to tell this story if he shuts up for 5 minutes. But, she hopes anybody won't be offended by it. And really, she's just saying it to amuse everybody, to give everybody a good time. If they don't like the tale that she tells, they can ignore it as just fantasy. Okay? Now, she's setting that up, and you'll see why in the story, why somebody might be mad about it. Okay, so pause for a minute. Go into your notes questions, and look at your first question. How does the beginning set up the reasons for telling the story? Okay. Now, picking up, we're going to scroll down again, and we're going to start with the actual story that she's telling. You ready? All right. The Wife of Bath's Tale. When good King Arthur ruled in ancient days, a king that every Briton loves to praise, this was a land brimful of fairy folk. The elf queen and her courtiers joined and broke their elfin dance on many a green mead. Or so was the opinion once, I read, hundreds of years ago in days of yore. But no one now sees fairies anymore. Okay, so we are definitely setting this up as long ago, far, far away, fairy tale land, literal fairies dancing in a fairy circle. Okay, and back in the days of good King Arthur, back in the good old days. But why aren't there fairies anymore? Well, for now, the saintly charity and prayer of holy friars seems to have purged the air. They search the countryside through field and stream as thick as motes that speckle a sunbeam, blessing the halls, the chambers, kitchens, bowers, cities, burrows, castles, courts, and towers, thropes, barns, and stables, outhouses, and dairies. And that's the reason why there are no fairies. Wherever there was wont to walk an elf, today there walks the holy friar himself. Okay, so there aren't fairies and magical things anymore because there's religious men all over the place. There's monks and friars and prayers, and they've blessed everything. So all these like supernatural fairy creatures aren't there anymore. So pause and go do your second question in your notes quiz. Okay. Now, wait for the end of this though. Here we go. I'm scrolling down. So she's Right, the holy friar, the holy priest himself. As evening falls or when the daylight springs, saying his matins and his holy things. Matins are kind of daily prayer. Walking his limit round from town to town, women can now go safely up and down by every bush or under every tree. There is no other incubus but he. So really, there is no one else to hurt you, and he will do no more than take your virtue. Ooh. Ooh. That's sharp. What does it mean to take a woman's virtue? Yeah, it means to rape her or to take her virginity. So, no, there's no supernatural things anymore. Nothing is going to hurt you except the priest, and he'll do nothing worse than rape you. Yeah, light, funny little romantic thing, right? Whoo! So we can see her opinion of holy people, and you can see right off the bat why someone might be offended by this story, right? Okay. But she's going to carry on. Now, it so happened, I began to say, long, long ago in good King Arthur's day, there was a knight who was a lusty liver. One day, as he came riding from the river, he saw a maiden walking all forlorn ahead of him, alone as she was born. And of that maiden, spite of all she said, by very force he took her maidenhead. Oof, this story's starting off kind of heavy. So we've got this knight, and he's a lusty liver. He's like out there just living it up. And lusty, of course, implies interest in sex too, right? So he's not like this perfect knight in shining armor, is he? And he sees a maiden who's walking along the river. She's sad, she's lonely, and he rapes her. That's what he does, and in spite of all she said. So she said no, and he didn't listen. Okay. Now, let's keep reading, and then we're going to go to your next question. This act of violence made such a stir, so much petitioning to the king for her. So the people got mad about what the knight did to this girl, and they went to the king and they complained. And so the king is going to give justice. That he condemned the knight to lose his head by course of law. He was as good as dead. It seems that then the statutes took that view. So the king sentenced the knight to death for rape, and that seemed to be the law back then. But that the queen and other ladies too implored the king to exercise his grace. So ceaselessly, he gave the queen the case and granted her his life, and she could choose whether to show him mercy or refuse. So apparently this knight is very handsome, I guess. And so the queen and the ladies of the court went to the king and said, hey, give us his case. Let us decide whether he lives or dies. So the king has turned it over to them. Okay, so look at your notes questions. You can start doing the third one, the lines 59 to 82. Okay, you can start with that. And then we're going to find out how his sentence changes. So right now he's sentenced to death, right? But the queen and the ladies of the court have now responsibility for him. The queen returned him thanks with all her might, so she thanked the king. And then she sent a summons to the knight at her convenience. So she sent a letter to the knight saying, show up at court when I tell you to. And expressed her will, you stand, for such is the position still, in no way certain of your life, said she. Yet you shall live, if you can answer me. What is the thing that women most desire? Beware the axe, and say as I require. If you can't answer on the moment, though, I will concede you this. You are to go a 12-month and a day to seek and learn sufficient answer. Then you shall return. I shall take gages from you to extort surrender of your body to the court. Okay, so the queen tells him, you can save your life if you correctly answer what women want most. But it's okay if you can't answer right now. I'll give you a year and a day to figure it out, and I will take bail, basically. And you can go and do whatever and figure it out, but you better be back here in a year and a day and with the right answer. Okay, so go back to your questions, and you can put down what his sentence is and how it changes. All right, now what do you think he's going to do? What would you do if you were asked what women want most? And you better get it right or you're going to be cookie. Sad was the night, and sorrowfully sighed, but there, all other choices were denied. And in the end he chose to go away, and to return after a year and a day, armed with such an answer as there might be sent to him by God. He took his leave and went. He doesn't have a choice. He knocked at every house, searched every place, yes, everywhere that offered hope of grace. What could it be that women wanted most? But all the same, he never touched a coast, country, or town in which there seemed to be any two people willing to agree. So he's traveled all over the country, he's talked to all these different kinds of people, and everybody has a different answer about what women want most. Some said that women wanted wealth and treasure. Honor, said some. Jollity and pleasure. Some, gorgeous clothes, and others, fun in bed. To be oft widowed and remarried, said others again. And some, that what most mattered was that we should be cosseted and flattered. That's very near the truth, it seems to me. A man can win us best with flattery. To dance attendance on us, make a fuss, ensnares us all, the best and worst of us. So here's our wife of Bath as the narrator hopping in, giving her opinion, right? What she thinks is pretty close to the real answer. All right? Pause. Go look at your question. All right. Coming back, scrolling down. So he's got all these different answers, and his time's about to be up, right? And here's our narrator coming back in. Some say the things we most desire are these: freedom to do exactly as we please, with no one to reprove our faults and lies, rather to have one call us good and wise. Truly, there's not a woman in 10 score who has a fault, and someone rubs the sore, but she will kick if what he says is true. You try it out, and you will find so too. So she's like, there's not a woman in 100 who, if she's got something wrong with her, or something that isn't perfect about her, and you point it out, she's going to give you a hard time about it. She's like, you try it and find out. We like to be, however vicious we may be within, we like to be thought wise and void of sin. Others assert we women find it sweet when we are thought dependable, discreet and secret, firm of purpose and controlled, never betraying things we are told. But that's not worth the handle of a rake. Women conceal a thing? For heaven's sake. Remember Midas. Will you hear the tale? Okay. Now, you know people like this. They start telling you one story, and then they interrupt themselves to tell some other story. This is what she's doing. So she's like, well, some women like to be thought discreet and secret, and like they keep things to themselves. But that's nonsense. Women can't keep secrets. Hello, internalized misogyny. And now she's going to launch into a tale about Midas. Now, you remember Midas from Greek mythology? There's 2 stories about Midas. The first one is his golden touch, right? Everything he touched turned to gold. The second one, though, you might not know. And this one ties into it, but it's the same Midas, okay? It just happened earlier than the golden touch. Among some other things, now stale, Ovid relates that under his long hair, the unhappy Midas grew a splendid pair of ass's ears. He has big old donkey ears. As subtly as he might, he kept his foul deformity from sight, save for his wife. There was not one that knew. He loved her best and trusted in her too. He begged her not to tell a living creature that he possessed so horrible a feature. Okay, so his wife is the only one who knows he has these big, goofy donkey ears, and he keeps them under his hair, and he asks his wife not to tell. Now, your side note tells you that basically she's got this wrong, and in the original story, it's his barber, not his wife. And she's retelling it actually in a way to prove that women can't keep secrets, right? So she's made it his wife. Okay. And she, so the wife, she swore were all the world to win, she would not do such villainy and sin. So she swears she's going to keep this secret, as saddle her husband with so foul a name. Besides, to speak would be to share the shame. Nobody wants to tell someone your husband's got big donkey ears. Nevertheless, she thought she would have died keeping this secret bottled up inside. You ever had a secret that you really, really wanted to tell and you really, really couldn't, and it just killed you that you couldn't tell it? It seemed to swell her heart, and she, no doubt, thought it was on the point of bursting out. Fearing to speak of it to woman or man, down to the reedy marsh she quickly ran and reached the sedge. The sedge is like where all the marshy plants grow. Her heart was all on fire, and as a bittern bumbles in the mire, she whispered to the water near the ground, "Betray me not, O water, with thy sound. To thee alone I tell it. It appears my husband has a pair of ass's ears." Ah, my heart's well again. The secret's out. I could no longer keep it, not a doubt. And so you see, although we may hold fast a little while, it must come out at last. We can't keep secrets. As for Midas, well, read Ovid for his story. He will tell. Okay, so what happens in the end of Midas' story is that the wind whistles through the reeds, and the reeds, the sound that the wind makes going, Midas has ass's ears, Midas has ass's ears. And so everybody hears the secret. And there's different versions. Sometimes it's a bird call, right? Okay, so, but her point in going to tell this is that women can't keep secrets. And now we're coming back to the story about the knight and his quest. Okay? All right. This knight that I was telling you about perceived at last he never would find out what it could be that women loved best. Faint was the soul within his sorrowful breast as home he went. He dared no longer stay. His year was up, and now it was the day. So he has to report back to the court and the queen, and he doesn't have an answer. And he knows if he doesn't have an answer, he's getting executed. As he rode home in a dejected mood, suddenly, at the margin of a wood, he saw a dance upon the leafy floor of 24 ladies, nay, and more. There's 24 women dancing in a ring out in the woods. Do you remember the beginning of this story? Who do you think those ladies are? Eagerly he approached, in hope to learn some words of wisdom ere he should return. But lo, before he came to where they were, dancers and dance all vanished into air. They were fairies. There wasn't a living creature to be seen, save one old woman crouched upon the green. A fouler-looking creature, I suppose, could scarcely be imagined. So here's this old, ugly lady there at the edge of the wood in the green space where all these pretty girls were dancing a second ago. What is he going to do? She arose and said, "Sir Knight, there's no way on from here. Tell me what you're looking for, my dear. For, peradventure, that were best for you. We old women know a thing or two, because we've seen a thing or two." Sorry. Okay. "Dear mother," said the knight. Now, she's not his mother, but it's a polite way of speaking about an old woman. said the knight. Alack the day, I am as good as dead if I can't say what thing it is that women most desire. If you could tell me, I would pay your hire. So I'll give you money if you can tell me this. Give me your hand, she said, and swear to do whatever I shall next require of you, if so to do should lie within your might, and you shall know the answer before night. So she says, give me your hand and promise to do the next thing I ask of you as long as it's within your power. Like, I'm not going to ask you to do, to fly or something. Okay? Upon my honor, he answered, I agree. Then, said the crone, I dare to guarantee your life is safe. I shall make good my claim. Upon my life, the queen will say the same. Show me the very proudest of them all, in costliest coverchief and jeweled caul, and fancy jewels and clothes, that dare say no to what I have to teach. Let us go forward without further speech. And then she crooned her gospel in his ear and told him to be glad and not to fear. So she whispers what women want the most in his ear. Okay? Now, pause for a minute. Go look at your questions and go do your next question. Okay. Now, we're on line 199. They came to court. This knight in full array, so he's got all his fancy armor on, stood forth and said, O queen, I've kept my day and kept my word and have my answer ready. There sat the noble matrons are married women, and heady young girls, and widows too that have the grace of wisdom, all assembled in that place. And there was the queen herself, throned to hear and judge his answer. So the queen is there, all the women of the court are there to judge whether this answer that he's going to come up with is the right one. And then the knight drew near, and silence was commanded through the hall. The queen gave order. He should tell them all what thing it was that women wanted most. He stood not silent like a beast or post, but gave his answer with the ringing word of a man's voice, and the assembly heard. Okay, you ready for his answer? My liege and lady, in general, said he, a woman wants the self-same sovereignty over her husband as over her lover, and master him. He must not be above her. That is your greatest wish. Whether you kill or spare me, please yourself. I await your will. So he's saying women want to be, have the same sovereignty over their husband as over their lover. Basically, women want to be in charge. Okay? Now, why would they have different powers over a lover than over a husband? Because women were property of their husband. Right? So when you're legally property, you don't actually have rights. So, but if you were having an affair with someone, you're not their property, right? So you guys are kind of equal, or you might be his kind of, you might kind of get to boss him around because he's going to do what he wants, so he gets what you want him to do, so he gets to sleep with you, right? So women want equality, but in such a way that they're basically in charge, that they get to be the boss. Okay, so pause and go into your question. And there's an opinion question there. All right, so the knight basically, he tells everybody what women really want, and then he's like, you can kill me or not, that's up to you, but that's my answer. In all the court, not one that shook her head or contradicted what the knight had said. So all the women of the court agree that this is what women really want. Women want kind of power over their men. Maid, wife, and widow cried, he saved his life. So they all agree this is the right answer. So this is good, right? The knight gets to live, if you think he should. But, wait for it. And on the word, Up started the old wife, the old lady from the woods, the one the knight saw sitting on the green, and cried, "Your mercy, sovereign lady queen, before the court disperses. Do me right. 'Twas I who taught this answer to the knight, for which he swore and pledged his honor to it, that the first thing I ask of him, he do it. So far as it lie within his might. Before this court, I ask you then, Sir Knight, to keep your word and take me for your wife. For well you know I have saved your life. If this be false, deny it on your sword." Old lady stands up, says, I kept my promise, now keep yours. And in front of the whole court, you better keep your promise. You promised to do what I ask of you. I want you to marry me. This old lady. Ugly old lady. To this handsome knight, right? What do you think he's got to do? Let's see how he reacts. "Alas," he said, "old lady, by the Lord, I know indeed that such was my behest, but for God's love, think of a new request. Take all my goods, but leave my body free." "A curse on us," she said, "if I agree. I may be foul, I may be poor and old, but yet will not choose to be for all the gold that's bedded in the earth or lies above, less than your wife, nay, than your very love." So he's like, oh my God, look, I know I promised I'd do anything, but not this, right? Take all my money, take all my land, but leave me free. And she's like, nope, I want you. And in fact, I want you to love me. All right, pause and go do your question. Okay, let's see how he reacts to this. Ready? "My love," said he, "by heaven, my damnation. Also, that of any of my race and station should ever make so foul a misalliance." Ooh. He's like, you'd be my damnation. I'm too good for you. I'm too handsome. I'm too rich. I'm too important for you, ugly old lady, old poor lady. Yeah. Yet, in the end, his pleading and defiance all went for nothing. He was forced to wed. He takes his ancient wife and goes to bed. Ooh la la, right? Well, a marriage is not official until it is consummated, right? So you can be married in the church, but until you've actually slept together, that marriage is not official. So he has to sleep with her for the marriage to count. Okay. So because he made this promise and because she said it in front of the full court, he's forced to marry her. Okay. Now peradventure, some may well suspect a lack of care in me, since I neglect to tell of the rejoicing and the display made at the feast upon their wedding day. I have but a short answer to let fall. I say there was no joy or feast at all, nothing but heaviness of heart and sorrow. He married her in private on the morrow, and all day long stayed hidden like an owl. It was such torture that his wife looked foul. Okay, this is our narrator, the wife of Bath, coming in, talking to her listeners and to us, saying, listen, I know you think that I'm a bad storyteller because I didn't explain the way, normally you would in a romantic story, like all the beauty of the wedding day and all the excitement and all the food. And yeah, except there wasn't any of that. They just got married privately, and then there was no big feast. He just stayed in his room all day because he thought she was so ugly. He was so embarrassed he had to marry her. Okay, scrolling down. You ready? Great was the anguish churning in his head when he and she were piloted to bed. He wallowed back and forth in desperate style. So he's tossing and turning in bed and not doing what a husband ought to be doing on the night of his wedding. His ancient wife lay smiling all the while. So she's laying there in bed next to him, smiling, and he's tossing and turning. At last she said, "Bless us! Is this, my dear, how knights and wives get on together here? Are these the laws of good King Arthur's house? Are knights of his also contemptuous? I am your own beloved, and your wife, and I am she indeed that saved your life. And certainly I never did you wrong. Why on this first of nights so sad a song? You're carrying on as if you were half-witted. Say, for God's love, what sin have I committed? I'll put things right if you will tell me how." Okay, so she's like, "What's your problem? I didn't do anything wrong. Is this how knights treat their brides?" "Put right?" he cried. "That never can be now." Because remember, marriage was for life, right? "Nothing can ever be put right again." Way to be a grown-up there, knight. "You're old, and so abominably plain, so poor to start with, so low-bred to follow. It's little wonder if I twist and wallow. God, that my heart would burst within my breast." "Is that," said she, "the cause of your unrest?" "Yes, certainly," he said. "And can you wonder?" Okay, so pause for a second. Go look at your questions. What complaints is this knight making? Why is he giving her such a hard time? Okay, and now we're going to find out her response. Because she said, "Well, tell me what the problem is and I'll fix it," right? And he's like, "You can't fix anything. Everything's awful forever. I could set right what you suppose a blunder. That's if I cared to, in a day or two, if I were shown more courtesy by you." She's like, "I could fix this all, but your attitude is awful." "Just now," she said, "you spoke of gentle birth, such as descends from ancient wealth and worth. If that's the claim you make for gentlemen, such arrogance is hardly worth a hen. Whoever loves to work for virtuous ends, public and private, and who most intends to do what deeds of gentleness he can, take him to be the greatest gentleman." So she's addressing his points one by one, where he said she's like low-born, right? She's like, listen, a real gentleman cares about being polite and kind and working for the right things. Remember what got him into the problem in the first place, right? He was claiming to be a gentleman and that he's so much better than her, but he was under death sentence because he raped a girl. So he's not a gentleman. "Christ wills we take our gentleness from him, not from a wealth of ancestry, long dim, though they bequeath their whole establishment, by which we claim to be of high descent. Our fathers cannot make us a bequest of all those virtues that become them best and earned for them the name of gentlemen, but bade us follow them as best we can. So our parents can give us money, but they can't give to us their good virtues. Like, we have to have that for ourselves. Thus, the wise poet of the Florentines, Dante by name, has written in these lines, for such is the opinion Dante launches, seldom arises by these slender branches prowess of men, for it is God no less wills us to claim of him our gentleness. Now, these are from the Divine Comedy. This tells us, one, Chaucer has read the Divine Comedy, and he's well read, but also that this character, this old lady fairy character, is well read and intelligent. But everyone knows this as well as I, for if gentility were implanted by the natural course of lineage down the line, public or private, could it cease to shine in doing the fair work of gentle deed? No vice or villainy could then bear seed. She's like, you don't inherit good behavior. You don't inherit grace. And if it did, all these rich people would never do anything wrong. And yet, obviously, they do. Take fire and carry it to the darkest house between this kingdom and the Caucasus, those were mountains, and shut the doors on it and leave it there. It will burn on, and it will burn as fair as if 10,000 men were there to see, for fire will keep its nature and degree. I can assure you, sir, until it dies. But gentleness, as you will recognize, is not annexed in nature to possessions. Men fail in living up to their professions, but fire never ceases to be fire. God knows you'll often find, if you inquire, some lordling full of villainy and shame. If you would be esteemed for the mere name of having been birthed a gentleman and stemming from some virtuous noble clan, and do not live yourself by gentle deed, or take your father's noble code and creed, you are no gentleman, though duke or earl. Vice and bad manners are what make a churl. Gentility is only the renown for bounty that your fathers handed down, quite foreign to your person, not your own. Gentility must come from God alone. That we are gentle comes to us by grace, and by no means is it bequeathed with place. Okay, she's really letting him have it here. She's giving him a teaching. Like, sit down, shut up, listen to what I have to say. Just because you have money doesn't mean you're a gentleman. And your behavior is what shows that, and your grace of God is what shows that, not your money, not your wealth, not where your family comes from. And she's hammering this home. Reflect how noble, says Valerius, and here she's quoting an ancient Roman, was Tullus, surnamed Hostilius, who rose from poverty to nobleness. And read Boethius, Seneca no less. Again, she's a highly educated woman. Thus they express themselves and are agreed, gentle is he that does a gentle deed. And therefore, my dear husband, I conclude that even if my ancestors were rude, and by rude she doesn't mean badly behaved, she means like humble, like from poor and no money. Yet God on high, and so I hope he will, can grant me grace to live in virtue still, a gentle woman, only when beginning to live in virtue, and to shrink from sinning. So she's like, don't you tell me that I'm low-born. I have virtue. You, something else. Okay. As for my poverty, which you reprove, Almighty God himself, in whom we move, believe, and have our being, right? That's the creed, right? She's bringing it back to the Bible. Chose a life of poverty, right? Jesus chose to be born poor. And every man or wife, nay, every child, can see our heavenly King would never stoop to choose a shameful thing. No shame in poverty if the heart is gay, as Seneca and all the learned say. So if your heart is happy, then there's no shame in being poor. He who accepts his poverty unhurt, I'd say, is rich, although he lacked a shirt. But truly poor are they who whine and fret and covet what they cannot hope to get. And he that having nothing covets not is rich, though you may think he is a sot. So really the only poor people are the people who are jealous and carry on when they can't have what they want. Just because you don't have money or possessions doesn't mean you're a bad person. True poverty can find a song to sing. Juval says a pleasant little thing. The poor can dance and sing in the relief of having nothing that will tempt a thief. It's true. You can be happy that you don't have anything anybody else wants to steal. Though it be hateful, poverty is good. A great incentive to a livelihood and a good help to our capacity for wisdom, if accepted patiently. So, although, nobody wants to be poor, there's really positives in being poor, right? Because you can learn from it, and it encourages you to work hard, right? Poverty is, though wanting an estate, a kind of wealth that none may calumniate. Poverty often, when the heart is lowly, brings one to God and teaches what is holy. Being poor makes you closer to God because you really have to trust in him, right? Gives knowledge of oneself and even lends a glass by which to see one's truest friends, right? When you're poor, when you don't have everything and you've got to depend on other people, you see who your friends really are. And since it's no offense, let me be plain. Do not rebuke my poverty again. So she's had to go at him like, I'm not lowborn because being lowborn doesn't really matter, right? It's how you act, not what your family is. There's no shame in being poor, so shut up. Lastly, you taxed me, sir, with being old. Yet, even if you had never been told by ancient books, you gentlemen engage yourselves in honor to respect old age. To call an old man father shows good breeding, and this could be supported from my reading. So she's like, look, even if no one ever told you, you were raised right. You know you're supposed to respect old people, so being old is not a bad thing. You say I'm old and fouler than a fen, like ugly. You need not fear to be a cuckold then. Okay, a cuckold is a guy, you probably know this, a guy whose wife sleeps with other men and he knows it, or sometimes it's even done in front of him and everybody knows it. Okay, so he has the shame of his wife being unfaithful, but also the shame that everybody knows. So she's like, okay, you said I'm old and ugly. Well, then you're never going to have the shame of me cheating on you, are you? Filth and old age, I'm sure you will agree, are powerful wardens over chastity. Nevertheless, well knowing your delights, I shall fulfill your worldly appetites. So I might be old and I might be ugly, but I know how to make you happy. You have two choices. Which one will you try? To have me old and ugly till I die, but still be a loyal, true, and humble wife that will never displease you all her life? Or would you rather I were young and pretty, and chance your arm what happens in a city, where friends will visit you because of me? Yes, and in other places too, maybe. Which would you have? The choice is all your own. So she gets through yelling at him and teaching him. And now she's like, all right, you got a choice. I can be young and pretty, and maybe I cheat on you with your friends. Or you could have me old and ugly and faithful to you for the rest of your days. What do you have? Okay, pause for a minute, go look at your questions. All right, and then now let's finish the story. You ready? What do you think he's going to decide? The knight thought long, and with a piteous groan, he's like, At last he said, with all the care in life, my lady and my love, my dearest wife, I leave the matter to your wise decision. You make the choice for yourself, for the provision of what may be agreeable and rich in honor to us both. I don't care which. Whatever pleases you suffices me. So he says, you make the decision, right? You'll make the right decision, whatever you choose. What do you think about that? And have I won the mastery, said she, since I'm to choose and rule as I think fit? Certainly, wife, he answered her. That's it. Kiss me, she cried. No quarrels. On my oath and word of honor, you shall find me both. That is, both fair and faithful as a wife. May I go howling mad and take my life unless I prove to be as good and true as ever wife was since the world was new. And if tomorrow, when the sun's above, I seem less fair than any lady love, than any queen or empress east or west, do with my life and death as you think best. Cast up the curtain, husband. Look at me. Okay, so she asks, okay, so I'm in charge because I get to make this decision? And he says yes. And then she says, okay, I pick both. I'm going to be beautiful and young and loyal to you. And if I wake up in the morning tomorrow and I'm not the most beautiful woman you've ever seen, you can do with me as you will. You can kill me if you want. And open the window and look at me. Because you remember, he had the curtains closed and he was sulking. Okay. And when indeed the knight had looked to see, lo, she was young and lovely, rich in charms, in ecstasy, he caught her in his arms. His heart went bathing in a bath of blisses and melted in 100,000 kisses. And she responded in the fullest measure with all that could delight or give him pleasure. So they lived ever after to the end in perfect bliss. And may Christ Jesus send us husbands meek and young and fresh in bed, and grace to overbid them when we wed. Okay, so may God send us young, handsome husbands who are good in bed and who listen to their wives. And Jesu, hear my prayer, cut short the lives of those who won't be governed by their wives. And all those old angry niggards of their pence, God send them soon a very pestilence. Okay, so she's praying that men who won't listen to their wives or who are stingy with their money, and that's what niggard there means, with a D on it. It means a person who's stingy with their money. I understand it sounds like an offensive word. It is not. It's an unfortunate word choice, but that's not what it means. It means a person who doesn't share their money. She wishes that men who don't listen to their wives and men who don't share their money die early of the plague. Yeah. All right. So, pause, go look at your last questions. All right. Now, this is a really interesting story, right? There's a lot going on here. So I want you to think about what you read, consider it, and then you have some consideration questions in Schoology. So think about what you read and look at your note questions, and then go answer your consideration questions. This has been a lot of fun, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.